Hey guys, I wanted to make a video trying to create a little bit more information about these spindle mount drag wheels. There's not a whole lot of videos or anything about how you actually put these things together or what's involved with putting them together. So hopefully you learn something from this. I'm sure there's a few different ways of doing this. This is just the way I did it. This is my first time putting something like this together. So let me know in the comments if you like the video, if you can add anything to it. Appreciate it. All right, guys. So the first thing about buying a spindle setup like this is you're going to have to figure out what spindles you're going to be using. These are the Racecraft 2-inch drop spindles, and they have a strange style spindle on them. On their website they call these RCI style or Racecraft style. They're also the same as the F-body spindles that came on like the 9802 Camaros and Firebirds. They're all the same. There's a few different types though that will not work with like strange style stuff. I know like the Mustangs have their spindles. I think Sand Tough has their own spindle, and Angelia and dragsters, they run different types of spindles. But that's the first step, is you got to figure out what type of spindle you're going to be using, because that's going to affect everything else that you buy. I went with weld wheels with the V series. These are their 15 by 3.5. Super lightweight wheel. I think this wheel with the bearings in it weighs right around like 7.5 pounds without the tire. So super lightweight. I wrapped them in Hoosier 26 by 4.5 bias ply drag tires, and so that's going to be the setup in the front. The brakes, when you go to spindle mount wheels, you're pretty much limited to running strange brakes. I think there's probably a couple other companies out there that make stuff for spindle mounts. I know there's a lot of really fast guys that are running single piston, just regular slotted rotors in the front. So I don't think the single piston is really going to be that big of an issue. It's definitely light. This rotor and caliper and everything that you see here, it weighs right up around 6.5, I believe, 6.5 pounds. So that's pretty light for a brake setup. But all this is engineered to work with the strange spindle. So now we're gonna kind of take you through assembling one of these and kind of show you a little bit about it. Okay, so after you get the tire mounted on the wheel, I had a shop up here in Kansas City mount my wheels. It's a shop called KC Customs. They deal with a lot of custom wheels and off-road wheels and things. So they were able to mount the tire, without scratching the wheel all up or anything. So very happy with that. The first step after you get the tire mounted is to knock in these bearing races. These wheels come from Weld with 2 bearing races for front and back. They also come with the bearings. Those come with the wheel. And so you're going to have to get these knocked into the wheel or pressed into the wheel, whichever you like. I have a bearing race driver set, so I just went ahead and knocked them in with this. Just like that. They weren't, crazy hard to get in or anything. I did warm the inside race of the wheel up a little bit, and I put assembly lube on the outside of the race and the inside of the race in the wheel. So they went in just fine. They seated out nice, and so after you get this done, you're going to want to go ahead and load these bearings up with grease. I'm using just a regular red grease. So I'm going to go ahead and load these up with grease, and then I will come back with you. Okay, so now that you got your bearing all packed with grease, you know, I left the front one out. It's packed in there nice, because on the back you're going to have to put this seal. But before I did that, you're going to have to install these studs in the back. These studs are for the brake rotor. So I put a little anti-seize on this end. You know, there's a chance these are going to get kind of hot and heat cycle a little bit with the brakes getting hot. So little anti-seize to keep them from welding themselves into the aluminum is always good. So from right here, I'm going to go ahead and knock in this seal. This seal is going to go against the spindle shaft, the bottom part of the shaft, and keep, you know, all your grease inside here instead all over your brake rotor. So I'm going to go ahead and knock that in, and then we'll be able to set this thing to the side and get our brakes ready to go on the spindle. Okay, so next we've got the spindle up here, and I went ahead and ran a tap down these holes. These are the two holes we're going to be using. Ran a tap down those. This is the driver's side. The rack is in the front of the K-member, so this is going to be the driver's side. So the way that the brakes mount up is going to put the caliper right there on the disc, just like it should be. So when I run these bolts in, I like to have just a little bit of Loctite on them, just to make sure they're not going to back out on their own or anything. And when you mount this caliper to the spindle, you're going to have to leave the bolts loose, and you're going to kind of try to snake this caliper over the spindle and in between the pads, so that it can kind of ride on the spindle loosely. Because the next step is going to be to lower the wheel down onto the spindle. And like you saw in the previous video, there's studs on the back of the wheel that are going to have to index these stud holes in the disc. So I will try and show you that as best I can. Okay, so there's the assembled spindle with the brake caliper mounted on it. As you can see here, the disc is just loose inside those pads. So you want to kind of just center it up as best you can over the spindle for when you lower the wheel down onto it. You want to try and line the wheel up. Those wheel studs that are in the back of the wheel, you're going to want to line those up with this, and just try and be as gentle as you can with it. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done, and then I'll pick it back up. Okay, so I just dropped the wheel down on the spindle. As you can see, all the studs are lined up with the holes in the rotor. So now it's time to go ahead and we'll drop this bearing in there. Okay, we'll put the spacer in there, and then we will put the castle nut, the spindle nut, on there. Get that almost ready to be torqued down. You don't want to tighten that down until you have the rotor bolted to the back of the wheel, just because you don't want to actually bind anything up and bend anything while you're tightening that down. So I just put it on snug, and then I'll pick this back up here in just a second. Okay, so we got the spacer in there, and then we got the spindle nut on there, just you know, just finger tight. It's nothing crazy. So the next step is to flip this whole thing over, and we're going to get to the back side of these studs here, and we're going to tighten the rotor to the wheel. So I will do that and show you what I'm talking about here in just a second. Okay, so here we are at the back of the wheel. These are the studs that we put in earlier, coming through the brake disc. You can see the seal that's on the back of the wheel that's now engaged on the actual spindle. So now it's time to install these washers and nuts. These are self-locking nuts that came with the wheel from Weld. These washers also came with it. The studs also come with it, of course, and so you put a washer and a nut on each one, and you tighten it down, and it'll set the rotor down right onto the wheel, and then I'll pick it back up from there when I get them tightened down. Okay, so we went ahead and I got those nuts and washers on the back, and they're all torqued down. You know, to get to them, you're basically just going to have to rotate your spindle around to where you can get to all of them, and you know, cross torque them back and forth, because as you tighten, it's actually going to press the rotor down onto the wheel. It's kind of like a little bit of an interference fit. So once it's tightened down, it'll actually set the caliper and everything at the right height, so where this won't bind at all. It'll move nice and free. And once you've got that, and all these are torqued down, you can flip the wheel back over and tighten your castle nut or your spindle nut down, put a cotter pin through it, and then we'll put the cap on, and it's a done deal. Okay, so now we got the spindle nut or the castle nut tightened down. Really, I put light pressure on this thing. I don't think it really needs a whole lot. Just snug it, and put the cotter pin in it. So at this point, everything's assembled. Everything moves freely. It's nice. So the last thing to do is to put the cap on. Just like that. And that is a done wheel. Alright guys, well that does it for this video. Hopefully I took a little bit of the mystery out of this for you. Hopefully you learned something. If you get any questions or comments or anything, feel free to post them. Thanks for watching.